In the United States, there is turmoil as the military prepares for a major confrontation. United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth ordered hundreds of United States Army generals and admirals to urgently gather, without stating a reason, at a Marine Corps base in Virginia next week. Moreover, there was a sharp increase in visits to pizzerias near the Pentagon on the evenings of September 25 and 26. This usually happens before or during important events. And against the backdrop of news that the Pentagon urgently summoned hundreds of generals and admirals, all of this looks suspicious. Donald Trump keeps the intrigue and pretends that he doesn't understand what he's being asked about at all. He says it's perfectly normal that I emphasize hundreds of United States Army generals and admirals would urgently gather for some kind of secret meeting. Meanwhile, Moscow declares that its hybrid attacks on Europe are revenge for Ukraine's strikes on Crimea, and China is openly attacking, preparing for an invasion of Taiwan. The Pentagon was silent for a long time, but later they did say that United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth decided to convene hundreds of American generals and admirals for an emergency meeting just to discuss the country's defense strategy with them. It may sound strange, but my name is Alexei Pichi. Let's resolve this situation. But before we start, I want to remind you that several news updates are released on this YouTube channel every day. To stay updated on all the news, I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel. And friends, I urge you to share the links to this video on your social networks and write a detailed comment under this episode so that as many viewers as possible can see this video. So, the Washington Post writes that an extremely unusual directive from the Pentagon was sent out to almost all top military officials around the world. In fact, the United States Secretary of Defense is calling all United States Army generals and admirals to an urgent meeting. Everyone must agree to stop what they're doing and urgently come to Virginia. The directive was issued earlier this week amid a possible United States government shutdown, as well as the fact that Pete Hegseth's openly politicized actions have heightened anxiety among his opponents, who fear that he is undermining the status of the Department of the Department of War as a nonpartisan institution, writes the Washington Post. And now Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell has confirmed that Pete Hegseth, quote, will address the top military leadership at the beginning of next week, but did not provide any further details. Parnell, who is a senior advisor to the United States Secretary of Defense, did not express any concerns about security. He said it's just a routine meeting, I stress, among hundreds of generals. It's still unclear if United States President Donald Trump will attend the meeting or if Pete Hegseth warned him in advance about his plans. But on Thursday afternoon, Trump told reporters in the Oval Office that he would attend the meeting, quote, if they want it. Well, despite the scale and secrecy of this meeting, both Trump and United States Vice President J.D. Vance downplayed its significance. Trump asked why this is so important. Why are you even asking about it? J.D. Vance, standing next to Trump, simply said no. There's nothing particularly unusual about hundreds of generals from all over the world talking to Hegseth. And here, just realize the scale. In the United States and dozens of other countries, there are about 800 generals and admirals, and the United States Army has 800. Hegseth's order applies to all senior officers with the rank of brigadier general and above, as well as their equivalents in the naval forces who hold command positions and their senior advisors. As a rule, each of these officers commands hundreds or thousands of enlisted personnel. It is expected that Hegseth's meetings will be attended by top commanders in conflict zones and senior military leaders stationed throughout Europe, the Middle East, and the Asia-Pacific region. And importantly, the order does not apply to senior officers holding staff positions. That is, only combat generals and admirals. The order states, quote, all generals holding command positions in ranks from 07 to 010 and their senior advisors from among the generals are ordered to report taking operational restrictions into account. Classes 07 to 010 refer to the military classification of all generals and admirals. Each commander usually travels with his senior advisor and several junior military aides. So the total number of participants in this summit apparently could exceed 1,000 people. And, I tried to find information. Has there ever been a case in history where the United States Secretary of Defense gathered such a huge number of generals for a single meeting? And I didn't find any? So it's logical that some have already stated that this raises concerns about security. All United States Army generals and admirals from around the world will gather in one place again, hundreds together. While they're here, the United States armies around the world will basically be left without much of their leadership. Moreover, the United States Department of Defense has and often uses highly secure video conferencing technology, allowing military personnel, no matter where they are, to discuss sensitive issues with the White House, the Pentagon, or both at the same time. But KEX will contact everyone directly. On the other hand, it looks rather strange that the United States of America is actually recalling all of its generals. From the Middle East, where Europe's war is ongoing, where there's a war, and from the Pacific Ocean, where China is preparing to attack Taiwan. That is, the troops are left without the presence of their generals for some time. It's interesting that the leaders of both the Republicans and Democrats in the committees and the Senate, as well as the House Armed Services Committees of the United States Congress, are not commenting on this event at all. Well, it seems they themselves don't understand what's going on at all, even though they're the ones who are supposed to know. And today, Bloomberg writes that United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth decided to call hundreds of American generals to an emergency meeting to discuss the defense strategy with them. But Bloomberg points out that the meeting is supposed to take place before the last day of the fiscal year and a possible shutdown. Against this background, funding from the United States federal budget for business trips of government officials, including the military, may be stopped. That's why Hegseth urgently wants to gather all the generals. But officially the meeting will be dedicated to the national defense strategy of the United States of America. Let me remind you, recently Trump renamed the Department of Defense to the Ministry of War, but one of the generals who spoke with the Washington Post said that it's ridiculous to gather all the generals to discuss the new defense strategy. Studying the consolidation of commands or giving lectures to commanders about military standards. The generals are completely shocked, because if a shutdown is declared, they won't be able to return to work around the world that same day. Why? Because all funding for business trips will be cut off, and all these generals will be stuck in Virginia for a while. Although maybe that's the plan, who knows? The thing is, the top leadership of the Trump administration is indeed preparing a new national defense strategy, which is expected to make homeland defense the country's main concern. After China, well actually for several years was considered the main national security threat to the United States, there's another point. In May, Pete Hegseth already issued a directive to reduce about 100 generals, and possibly a new reduction is coming because it has already been announced that the total number of generals and admirals in the United States Armed Forces will be reduced by at least 10%. In general, for now, everything is shrouded in mystery. It looks extremely strange and no one can explain anything. But we just have to wait until next week. But nevertheless, here's what I managed to study in Western media. The insights that are being discussed. Many American military personnel are shocked by these events. I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.